The storm had swallowed the night whole. Rain crashed against the buildings, hammering the streets until they seemed to bleed mud and water. In a narrow alley, half hidden behind overturned crates and sagging cardboard, the stray cat crouched low, her thin body curled protectively around her litter of kittens. She was soaked to the bone, her fur matted and heavy with cold. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts as she tried to shield her babies from the merciless downpour. The kittens, no more than a few days old, mewled softly beneath her, their tiny cries nearly drowned by the roar of thunder overhead. They squirmed against her belly, instinctively seeking warmth that she no longer had to give. Fear twisted in her chest tighter than hunger ever had. The storm's fury grew worse, the winds snatching at her fragile shelter until the soaked cardboard tore loose and flew away like weightless paper. Her eyes darted in panic. Water crept closer, seeping under her paws, rising with cruel determination. She pressed her kittens closer to her damp body, but the cold was everywhere, soaking into their tiny bones. Then, without warning, a violent surge of rainwater swept through the alley, tearing the ground from beneath her. One kitten was ripped from her grasp, carried by the current. She sprang after it, claws scraping helplessly over the slick concrete, her frantic yowl lost in the storm's howl. Another kitten slipped away, tumbling into the swirling gutter, its cries fading beneath the rush of water. She chased them with everything she had, lungs burning, paws stinging. But the storm was relentless. Her heart hammered in her chest as she darted back and forth, eyes wild, searching the flood for any sign of her babies. But the water kept rising, swallowing the alley in its cold embrace. The kittens were gone from her sight, lost in the dark chaos. She stood trembling in the middle of the drowned alleyway, her soaked whiskers dripping, her eyes wide with terror. Her body sagged from exhaustion, but she lifted her head once more and let out a desperate cry into the storm. A cry so raw and filled with longing it seemed to pierce the raging wind itself. There was no answer, only the endless, merciless rain. Morning broke as a dull, gray smear across the sky, casting a cold light over the wreckage left behind. The storm had passed, but it had stripped the world bare. Streets were littered with broken branches and trash, deep puddles pooling in every hollow. In the alley, water still trickled along the gutter, carrying fragments of things lost to the night. The mother cat had not moved far. Her soaked fur clung to her gaunt frame, and her body trembled from cold and exhaustion. But her eyes, sharp, aching, desperate, searched the debris without rest. Every part of her was tight with urgency, her paws padding through the wet ground as she sniffed every shadow, every corner of the ruined alleyway. She found nothing but the fading scent of her kittens and tiny muddied paw prints that led nowhere. Her chest heaved with shallow breaths. She could not call for them anymore. Her throat was raw from the cries she had howled into the storm. But her heart, wild and unbroken, refused to give in. She kept looking, moving slowly now, as though the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders, but her instincts would not allow her to stop. The world around her stirred back to life. Shopkeepers stepped cautiously into the streets, surveying the damage. Cars rolled by, splashing water from potholes. No one saw the silent pain of the small creature weaving through the ruins. No one, except for one pair of eyes. Laura stood by the window of the corner cafe, cradling a cup of coffee between her cold hands. She had come in early to help clean up after the storm, her heart heavy from the news of flooded homes and scattered lives. Her gaze drifted to the alley, and something caught her breath. There, in the shadow of the broken crates, the stray cat moved with heartbreaking purpose, her body thin and trembling, her eyes never still. Laura set down her cup her pulse quickening with concern. She stepped outside into the chill, her boots splashing through puddles as she drew closer. The mother cat stopped, her ears flattening with wary fear, but Laura's hands stayed open, her voice gentle. "It's all right," she whispered, her heart aching. "I see you." Laura's breath clouded in the cold air as she took another step forward, careful not to startle the cat. The mother didn't run, but her eyes flicked toward the puddles and broken debris with a kind of frantic hunger, as if torn between fear and the desperate pull of her lost kittens. Her ribs moved visibly beneath her wet fur, every breath sharp with exhaustion, yet she kept moving, nose low to the ground, weaving between scattered trash and waterlogged crates. Laura's chest tightened. This wasn't a cat merely searching for food or shelter. She recognized something far deeper. This was a mother looking for her children. Laura felt a deep, aching pull in her chest, memories flashing unbidden of a winter years ago, when her childhood cat had gone missing in a blizzard. She had stood at the door for days, waiting, hoping for a miracle that never came. She had been too small to save her then, too helpless against the cold. But now, here in this ruined alleyway, she was not a child. She could do something. The cat paused at a clump of soaked newspaper, sniffing frantically, then pawing at it with trembling urgency. Her tail flicked, her head darting up as though she had caught a trace of a familiar scent. Laura's heart thudded in her chest. She dropped to her knees in the wet ground without caring about the chill seeping through her jeans. She gently reached out, moving aside the papers, her fingers numb and shaking. Nothing but mud, a cruel emptiness. The mother cat let out a low, broken sound, a rasping whimper that went straight to Laura's heart. She swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in her eyes, and shifted her gaze along the alley. The storm had carried debris in wild patterns, and the water could have dragged the kittens anywhere. But Laura refused to let despair settle. She looked at the cat, at the fight still burning behind those desperate eyes. "You're not alone in this," Laura whispered, as much to herself as to the cat. She rose to her feet, scanning the alley with fresh determination. "We're going to find them, I promise you." The mother cat watched her, something fragile and fleeting passing between them, as though she dared to believe. Laura moved deeper into the alley, her eyes combing through the wreckage with sharp focus. The mother cat stayed close, her thin frame brushing against Laura's leg as she darted ahead, stopping at every corner to sniff and paw through the rubble. Laura's heart ached watching her, the urgency in every frantic motion unmistakable. This wasn't just survival. This was love fighting against impossible odds. The alley narrowed between two buildings, the puddles deeper here, trash swept into corners by the raging storm. Laura shoved aside a piece of soggy cardboard, her breath catching as she listened for any sound beyond the drip of water from broken gutters. For a moment there was only silence, but then, faint, fragile, like a whisper in the wind, she heard it, a tiny, desperate mewl. Her chest tightened. She dropped to her knees, palms pressing into the cold, wet pavement as she searched the shadows. "Come on, little one," she murmured, her eyes straining in the dim light. The mother cat's ears pricked forward, her body tense with hope. She let out a soft, tremulous cry in response to the sound, as if calling her kitten home. Laura's hands found a pile of damp rags wedged beneath a splintered pallet. She pulled them aside, her breath stuck in her throat. There, trembling and slick with rain, lay a tiny kitten, its fur matted and its eyes squeezed shut against the cold. It let out another thin cry, legs kicking weakly against the wet ground. Relief surged through Laura so sharp it made her dizzy. Carefully, she scooped the kitten into her hands, cradling it close to her chest. feeling its faint heartbeat against her palm. The mother cat rushed forward, nuzzling her baby, a soft, broken purr rising in her throat. Laura felt tears sting her eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered, wrapping the kitten in the warmth of her scarf. But even in that fragile moment of victory, her eyes swept the alley once more. She knew there had been more than one. Hope stirred and fear shadowed her relief. She gently touched the mother cat's head. "We're not finished yet," she said softly, her voice tight with resolve. "We'll find the others. I swear to you." Laura held the tiny kitten close, feeling its damp fur against her skin, the weak rise and fall of its breath like a fragile thread between life and loss. The mother cat stayed pressed against her, eyes locked on her kitten as if afraid it might vanish again. Laura's scarf wasn't enough warmth, and she knew time was slipping fast. But she also knew there was still another life out here, another heartbeat waiting to be found. She couldn't leave, not yet. Cradling the kitten in one arm, she pushed herself to her feet, her knees aching from the cold ground. She scanned the alley, every corner soaked and strewn with storm debris, every shadow hiding both hope and heartbreak. The mother cat padded beside her, her limp barely noticeable beneath her determination. Laura could feel it, the fear in the air, but also something stronger beneath it, a quiet, stubborn will to survive. A noise, so faint she almost thought she imagined it, prickled her senses. Her breath caught as she tilted her head, listening hard. There it was again, a thin, muffled mew, weaker than before but unmistakably real. Laura's eyes darted toward a rusted storm drain partially blocked by debris. Her heart plunged. Number? She hurried over, careful not to slip, and peered inside. Water still trickled through the grate, pooling at the bottom where, wedged between two pieces of trash, a second kitten lay shivering. Its fur was slick with rain, its tiny chest rising and falling so faintly she thought it might stop at any second. Panic clawed at her throat, but she shoved it down. There was no space for fear now. Laura set the first kitten down safely inside her coat, tucking it close to her body. She reached into the storm drain, her fingers scraping cold metal, stretching as far as she could. The gap was tight, cutting into her wrist, but she forced her arm deeper, ignoring the sting. "Hold on," she breathed. "I've got you." Her fingertips brushed soft, sodden fur. Carefully, she hooked her fingers around the fragile body and drew the kitten out, lifting it into her trembling hands. Its eyes were shut, its body limp, but it was alive. Laura clutched both kittens to her chest, tears blurring her vision. "You're safe," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're safe now." Laura didn't waste a heartbeat. With both kittens cradled tightly against her chest, she turned to the mother cat, who paced in tight circles, her gaze never leaving her babies. Rain dripped from the eaves above, soaking Laura's hair as she pressed the kittens closer to her warmth, feeling the tremors that shook their fragile bodies. They were alive, but only just. The cold had its claws in them, and she knew she was holding them on the edge of life. Her mind raced, her breath sharp in her throat as she hurried back toward the street. She couldn't leave them here, not in this wet, frozen ruin. She whispered to the mother cat, coaxing her to follow. There was no hesitation. The cat trotted after Laura with wild, frantic eyes, as if understanding this stranger was her only hope now. And Laura, heart pounding, felt the weight of that trust settle heavy on her shoulders. Shelters were overwhelmed. She had heard the calls go out across town after the storm, homes flooded, animals stranded. No one would come fast enough. She didn't hesitate. Her apartment was just 5 blocks away. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and it was dry. It was life. Holding the kittens as gently as she could, she ran. The city blurred around her. Faces turned, some pausing in surprise as they saw her sprinting through the puddles, soaked to the bone. 2 tiny lives pressed against her, and a desperate mother cat racing at her heels. Laura didn't stop. Every step mattered, every second counted. She could feel the chill still clinging to the kittens, could feel their thin, fragile breaths against her skin. Her chest burned by the time she reached her front door. Fumbling with her keys, she forced it open and swept inside, dropping to her knees as she wrapped the kittens in soft towels. Her hands moved fast but careful, drying them, trying to rub warmth back into their limp bodies. She filled a hot water bottle and tucked it beneath them, her heart twisting with fear as she watched for any sign of life. The mother cat pressed close, curling her body around her kittens, her purring weak but steady, as if willing her babies back to warmth. Laura reached out, her voice low and thick with emotion. "We're going to save them," she promised. "We're going to bring them back." Laura stayed crouched beside them, refusing to move as minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The kittens lay bundled in the towels, their tiny bodies still, but there was a thread of warmth returning beneath her palms. She dared not look away. Every small shiver, every twitch of their ears felt like the spark of life struggling to hold on. She kept whispering to them, her voice a soft, steady current of hope, as if her words alone could guide them back from the edge. The mother cat remained curled tightly around her kittens, her head low, her nose nudging them gently as though she could push warmth into them with sheer will. Laura watched her, heart aching at the quiet strength in that fragile frame. Storm or no storm, this mother had never stopped fighting. Laura felt a deep respect, almost reverence, rise in her chest. They were survivors, both of them, and she would not let their fight end here. Slowly, Laura reached for the formula she had kept from fostering stray kittens once before. Her hands trembled as she filled the tiny syringe, her heart pounding against her ribs. She squeezed a drop of warm milk onto the tip and brought it to the nearest kitten's mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Her breath caught, a lump rising in her throat. But then, so faint it was barely there, the kitten's lips parted, its tiny tongue flicking out to taste the warmth. Tears welled in Laura's eyes as she carefully fed the kitten, watching life creep back into its fragile body. The second kitten stirred too, drawn by the scent. She did the same for this one, her chest tightening with every weak but determined swallow they made. The mother cat licked their faces between feedings, her eyes never leaving them, her purr growing a little stronger, a little steadier. Laura's own heart finally allowed a breath of hope. She pressed the towels tighter around them, adding another bottle of warm water beneath the nest she had made. "That's it," she whispered, tears slipping freely now. "Keep going, keep fighting." Outside the window, the sky began to clear, a quiet light seeping through the clouds, and in that fragile dawn, surrounded by warmth and stubborn love, the kittens clung to life, inch by inch, breath by breath. The days that followed were quiet, but never still. Laura woke with the sunrise. No alarm needed, her heart trained to the faint sounds of the kittens breathing in their small nest by the heater. They were stronger now, their fragile bodies filling out with new weight, their fur soft and dry, no longer clinging to their skin like before. She watched them with a tenderness she didn't know she had left in her. Every flick of their tiny tails, every blink of their blue, growing eyes felt like a small miracle unfolding in front of her. The mother cat stayed close always, her body wrapped around them like a shield. Her eyes had changed. They no longer carried the wild, frantic terror of that stormy morning. There was still caution in them, but Laura could see something gentler growing beneath the surface, trust, quiet and hesitant but real. Laura never forced her. She simply stayed close, offering food, warmth, and soft words until the mother began to meet her gaze without fear. As the kittens grew stronger, they began to crawl from their nest, exploring Laura's small apartment with clumsy steps and curious eyes. Laura watched them play, their tiny paws batting at her shoelaces, their wobbly leaps full of newfound life. She felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized had been tight for so long. It was as if these small, stubborn creatures had reminded her how to breathe again. The storm that had once torn them apart had, in the strangest way, stitched their lives together. Laura knew it without question. She had saved them, but they had saved her too. In their fight to survive, they had pulled her into something bigger than fear, bigger than loss. She never filled out the adoption forms that arrived in her inbox. When she read the questions, her answer was already clear. They were already home. On a bright morning, with sunlight pouring through the windows and the kittens tumbling across the floor in a flurry of paws and soft mews, Laura knelt beside them. She reached out, gently stroking the mother cat's fur, feeling the steady purr rise beneath her hand. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet certainty. "We all are." And in that moment, as sunlight danced across their little family, Laura understood, sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or fanfare. Sometimes they arrive quietly, carried on the back of a storm. If this story filled your heart, remember, every act of kindness creates a ripple far beyond what we see. Subscribe to our channel for more true, deeply moving stories that show how even the smallest lives are worth fighting for. Share this story to spread hope and remind others that miracles are born from compassion. Together we can change the world, one life, one rescue, one quiet act of love at a time. Subscribe now, and let's keep believing in second chances and the power of kindness.